Welcome back to the Modeling Success in Action podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, and today I am joined by Neil Hamilton. With over 20 years of national broadcast sales experience dealing with Canada's largest advertisers, plus another 20 in both residential and commercial real estate, it can be genuinely said that Neil knows negotiation. Sensing an acute societal need, he's now applied his negotiation skills to couples in crisis. Stay or go. And whatever the decision, what's the most painless way to make that happen? Welcome to the show, Neil.
Thanks, Jessica. A pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. So I love that you kind of frame it for us that, you really are taking those negotiation skills that you learned through the sales, career that you
Right.
had for the last 40 years, and then applying those negotiation skills to people, to relationships. It's interesting because you think of mediators, but you don't necessarily always think of negotiation when you think of relationships. How did your brain go there? Like, what made you make that connection?
Well, when you think about it, marriage, or even if it's just a relationship, maybe a non-marital, but a relationship, you're negotiating every day. You're negotiating with where you may go that day, what you're going to do, what food you may want to buy that day. So you're constantly, human beings are constantly in a state of negotiation. And as we know, over the last number of years, and I won't become a US basher, but we've got a interesting person down below our border here who's made things kind of difficult for our country. And we have come out in the last number of years out of a pandemic that made things absolutely tough for the whole world. And it's affected people, and therefore it's affected relationships. So there's a lot more pressure on
Mhm.
individuals now. There's more pressures on children, and again, that's family. And because of all those things, there's simply more pressure on couples. And therefore, there's a need for someone to walk people through negotiations of their relationship, especially if that relationship may be in crisis. And therefore,
Mhm.
I'm putting myself forward with the years and years and years of experience that I've got in negotiation to help people negotiate their relationship and possibly to a point of where it might have to end, but hopefully, not that I'm biased, but hopefully to a point where it can thrive.
Mhm. Well, I feel like most people, when they enter into a relationship, the intended outcome is that it is thriving, right? That it does last and that it does
Absolutely.
become something that is a long-term partnership. But, not everything in life lasts, and with the best
Exactly.
intentions, sometimes we have to pivot and go sideways. So I'm curious, when you saw this kind of need in the world, like, where did you start? Was it a personal friend that came to you? Was it a referral? Was it your own relationship? Like, how did this even start that you knew, oh, hey, I can help the couples this way in their negotiation?
Well, it actually started with a friend of mine, a gentleman, and we were having coffee, and I certainly won't mention names because this person's had 5 marriages. So, and he's and
So
the one
Elizabeth Taylor and you were sitting down to coffee.
that's right, exactly. And, hopefully, with this gentleman, who's a good friend, hopefully 5th time a charm, because he does seem to be his 5th marriage seems to be doing very well. And so, and he's been sharing that with me. And we then got talking a little bit about the whole thing of relationships and what's been happening in the world and all the pressures that are on couples now. And he knows that I've been a negotiator for many years in various areas, of which you just mentioned. And he said, "You know what? I think there's a need out there. Why don't you fill it?" And I went, "Wow, that isn't that interesting." I'd never really thought about it, but the more I
Mm.
thought about it, the more I thought it was a great idea.
Mhm. And so, how does this show up in your everyday life? Like, because I love how you're like, well, you're negotiating in your partnership every single day. Where do we go? What do we eat? What do we do? Right. So,
Yeah.
I I've heard you mention your wife a few times, and I assume that you guys have been happily married, for hopefully most of that. So teach me how this is showing up in your life, this negotiation.
Well, um, it's shown up in probably through maybe a bit more through our extended family, through closer relatives of ours that maybe have had some issues. And it brought it kind of home to me a little more acutely. Um, and that was something that kind of after talking with my friend, as I just mentioned, I started thinking about some of our closer relatives and their relationships, and I thought, boy, I can look to my own family for what's been going on here, and that spurred me on even a little bit further to explore this more. And so I did a little bit of exploration on the internet, and that's when I found out that there's very much a need for this kind of thing, for this, for what I do. And a lot of people don't want to get involved with lawyers and don't want to have to pay what a lawyer could charge. So I can be a professional alternative to those kinds of things.
Mhm. Okay. So so then, like you said, you're seeing it in your extended family. There's all these pressures of the whole, the whole world in general is feeling a lot of pressures these days. So I'm
Sure
curious, like
is.
beyond that, what have you noticed? Like, right? So beyond that, why are you noticing that the couples themselves, seem to be finding themselves in these conflicts and they're needing the negotiations? Is there a theme? Is there a pattern that you're noticing?
Not particularly a pattern other than the pattern of so much pressure on couples now and adding children to the mix with what's going on the internet. And as you probably are very aware, Australia just banned a lot of internet connection for kids, and Canada is about to do the same thing. And that's the other thing. When I mentioned earlier that we've got, pressures from the United States, which we've never really faced before in Canada, pressures worldwide after the pandemic that we've never really had to face before. And now we've got pressures directly from the internet on children and how the internet is affecting how children are being brought up. And that then affects couples, the mother and the father, and and creates all kinds of new pressures. And as you well know, especially with the kind of work you do, there is so many more pressures on human beings now. And when there's pressures on human beings, there's going to be pressures on the relationship. So it's
Mhm.
I just see what I do as something that's very much needed in the world these days because there's so much pressure on couples, either the two of them just together and or with children. The world's moving
Mhm.
at light
Could you
speed right now.
so I'm curious, and I'm sure the listeners are curious of what your model of the world, what your negotiation perspective, kind of how it plays out with these couples. Could you give us a story or an example of kind of like what this looks like so we can wrap our heads around how you approach this?
Well, what I do when I first talk with couples, because they come to me and every couple has a different situation. You may have a couple that are really at each other's throats and they need to leave each other, and maybe you've got the other end of that spectrum where they still love each other, but in many ways they're driving each other crazy. So I am absolutely positively non-judgmental. I am there to I am there based on their will. What is it that they want to do? Now, sometimes they don't know, so that's when I have to get in, dig deeper with each person in the couple and say, okay, where are you at in this relationship at this point? Where do you think it's going? Where do you think it should go? And then I do the same thing with the other partner, and I see if, where there's common ground, if there is. And again, no bias. I want to do what they want to do, but sometimes they don't know what they want to do. So I have to ask a lot of questions, and I have to dig deeper into what is affecting their relationship right now, where it came from, and where it could possibly go. So it does take a few sessions to kind of get a feel for where I think the couple's going. Because again, like I said, sometimes they don't know. They come to me and say, "Oh, hey, here's the problem. What do we do?" So I have to dig a little deeper, and usually after 3 or 4 sessions, it comes out. You start to get a feel, maybe one person's causing more than the other. Maybe they're both, equally causing the breakdown or whatever that word might be. So you just work with them to try to ferret out where that couple is at. And usually after 3 or 4 sessions, you get a pretty good idea as to where you think this relationship is going to go, and then you try to lead them in the direction that they want to go. And again, I don't want to. When I say lead, I don't want to use that. I don't want to define that in the wrong way. They're leading me, but I am then leading them where it looks like they want to go. And I'm always asking more questions. Now, does this where we're going here? Does this seem to work? And then one may say yes, one may say no. If the one who says no, I say, okay, what does work then? Come back to me. Give me what would work for you to make the relationship work. So a lot of questions because a lot of the time the couple simply does not know and they need to be led.
Mhm. Well, I feel like that's the truth a lot of the time when it comes to people. We just are like living every day on autopilot and not really even getting curious about what direction we're trying to go in. It's like, getting in your car and just driving aimlessly and wasting all your gas and not really going anywhere. So that curiosity. So once you get clear, like, let's imagine that you need to dovetail outcomes and one person has decided that they really are quite sick of this relationship and one of them really is still wanting to keep it going. So, what do you do at that point? How do you help them negotiate and dovetail those outcomes even if they don't want the same thing?
Well, that's that's difficult. And it doesn't mean that every time you're going to have things work out the way you want. Now, generally speaking, if a couple comes to you, usually they're both on the same page, either wanting to end it or not, or try to figure out how to keep it together. So at this point, I have never actually had a couple come to me where one definitely wanted out and the other one didn't. They both wanted to work it out
Mhm.
one way or the other. So, I mean, let's face it. I've been in lots of negotiations where negotiation failed. I mean, not all times do human beings come together. So you just have to be
Mhm.
aware of that. But at, to this point, I've never actually had a couple like that where one absolutely wanted out and the other absolutely wanted to stay. That's tough. That's tough
Okay.
because people are people, right?
Yeah,
So I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
exactly. So then, okay, so let's imagine that their wants aren't so polar opposite. How do we still, how do we have it so that they once they make their compromise, once the negotiation is over, that they can tolerate their frustrated desires, right? I always say, the definition of maturity is the ability to tolerate our frustrated desires. And if people are being immature in relationships, then they sabotage or they get into resentment and it causes all kinds of problems. So how do you help them to tolerate those frustrated desires so that they can be satisfied with what the negotiation process ends up with?
Well, once we have come to a what we'll call a decision, and let's take it the positive way. And let's say, okay, we've decided we really want to work at it and stay together. Um, I
Hmm.
I generally, and this would be with their permission, but I generally stay with them on follow up. In other words, they say, "Yeah, okay, so 2 weeks later, yeah, things are going well. Thank you so much. Yeah, we really enjoyed working with you." And well, then maybe 2 weeks later, I phone and say, "How are things?" "Well, we've had an issue." I say, "Okay, is this an issue that we can work through, or is this a or are we has it become a deal breaker?" Now, as I said, I've never had a situation so far, touch wood, where things have gone really bad afterwards. Most of the time, once we work through it, because it does take a little while, we have some had some successful outcomes. But I generally will work with them on a couple by couple basis, maybe once a month or once every 8 weeks, or depending on what they want, just to keep things on an even keel. So, as I said, I've never had a really, really bad situation develop yet. That could easily happen, but, generally speaking, the getting together, of the minds works, and may just need a little bit of follow-up as we go forward.
So, give us a little insight into your skills as a negotiator. Like, so if let's imagine that there's a couple out there and they're going, I don't know if we're in the stay or go phase, but there's definitely some things we need to negotiate on. If they wanted to step into your model of the world, how do you look at both sides of it? How do you look at the negotiation? What's your perspective on that?
Well, when you're in a negotiation, and it doesn't really matter if it's a marriage or a legal contract or what anything else,
Sales,
you
yeah.
yeah, that's right. Sales, the world revolves around sales, right? Because everything is a transaction when you think about it. So, what you have to do is you have to dig deep with each party, each member of the couple, to find out what is really motivating them and what is motivating them to feel that they're not being heard. Okay. Or if they're just, or if they feel they're just not able to make progress in the relationship. So what I try to do is I try to break down each side and say, okay, now when you do this, do you realize what this is doing to your partner? And many times, Jessica, many times the partner who's done whatever they've done will say to me, "Oh my god, I don't think I really looked at it that way." And I said, "Well, that's what you have to do, because every time you make a decision or you make a statement, the other person is receiving that statement and they're taking it in whatever way they're taking it. Maybe they're not taking it the way it was meant." So, what I find so many times is the old saying, "It's not what you say, it's how you say it." And you can say something to someone that elicits a very, positive reaction, like, "Oh, gee, I don't think I realized I was doing that. I'll try to change." Or the other side of that, as we both know, somebody screams at one person, and the other person goes, "Oh, well, heck with you. I'm gonna do what I want." Well, that's not helpful. Obviously, that's not helpful. So what I try to do is to get each partner to realize that maybe the reaction that the other partner has displayed has a great deal to do with how you put it originally. Because again, a relationship is people interacting, right? They're interacting on what TV shows they like and want to watch, where they want to go to eat, how they want to manage their money. I mean, there's a relationship covers just about anything you can think of. Maybe the wife doesn't like the way the husband dresses. Maybe she thinks he should be looking a little more upscale, and that has happened to me a few times.
I was just
And
thinking, I was like, when my husband's wardrobe has definitely increased in the last 12 years we've been together. When I first met him, he had
yeah.
holes in all of his pants.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
No, yeah. No, I mean, my wife's a very appearance-oriented person, so, I get a little bit of that from my wife, and I try very hard, uh, to, uh, uh, to take her advice.
Mhm. It really is a dance, right? Like you're totally right. Everything here is it's transactional, it's negotiation, right? It's like, you dress a little bit nicer and your reward is that she gives you compliments and she appreciates you. And when you're out, for dinner, she's standing at your side instead of across the room going, I don't know who that guy is, right? Or whatever, right? Like there's always
Exactly.
a trade-off for everything that's happening, right? Or maybe you just don't hear the nagging.
Exactly.
So as you were
Yeah,
saying that though, it was really making me think about
yeah,
NLP, like neuro linguistic programming, right? A lot of sales and communication people will use neuro linguistic programming. It's a fantastic tool for negotiation and for understanding the other person's side of things so that you can respond to their needs in a way that helps them to come over to what kind of, to dovetail those outcomes. So make it so that you get what you need,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. That's
And
right.
one of the presuppositions of NLP is the meaning of your communication is the response that you get back, right?
Right.
The meaning of
Right.
your
Right.
communication is the response.
Yep.
So that means it
Very
doesn't matter
true.
what you said, it's how the other person reacts to it is the meaning of it,
E
right?
exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
So kind of what you do and what I do can kinda dovetail in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Neil. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for being on here with me. Before we wrap this all up today, is there anything else that you'd like to leave for the listeners so that they could, take something away to step into your model of the world?
Well, the only thing I would say, and this applies to all human beings, a couple of things. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's one of the things. And you know what? You always have to realize that whether it's a friend or a spouse or whatever that may be, they're probably coming from a different view of the world than you are. And we have
Mhm.
to appreciate that about other human beings. And we have to try to dovetail a little bit with how they see the world, and it helps us change how we see the world and how we react with it. Interact with it, I should say.
Absolutely.
So
And I mean, and that's
we all need to work at it, Jessica. We all need to work at it.
we do. It's true. And I was just saying to Neil before I jumped on here that we're celebrating. This is 51. I just got a notice that we've already recorded 50 episodes of the Modeling Success in Action podcast. And each and every one of those episodes has a different person with a different model of the world. So to give you an idea of just how varied it is. So thank you so much, Neil, for being on the show today. I really appreciate you. If anyone wants to get in contact with him, I will leave the details below. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's been a pleasure.